A night, we're stepping into that hidden world, the Victorian brothel. Not the glamorous kind whispered about in novels, but the real one. The one filled with dim light, heavy perfume, worn-out furniture, and the constant tension between survival and collapse. To most of society, these houses were a stain to be ignored. But for thousands of women, they were a last refuge, a place to sleep, to eat, to exist when the rest of the city turned its back. Life inside wasn't about temptation or pleasure, it was about making it through the night without breaking. Imagine stepping inside for the first time. The madam greets you with a sharp look, measuring what you might be worth. The air is thick with the scent of powder and candle smoke. A few women sit in front of a mirror, fixing curls that have been redone too many times. Somewhere downstairs, laughter rises, practiced, not joyful. You're told the house rules, how to dress, when to speak, who to trust. Every minute, you're learning to survive a world built on performance. Victorian London liked to pretend it was a city of morals and manners. Yet, behind the fog and finery, it hid one of the largest underground economies in history. Men who preached purity by day visited these houses by night. Lawmakers, doctors, soldiers, all found their way through the same doors they publicly condemned. But the women who lived inside didn't have the luxury of hypocrisy. Their days were short, their nights long, and their choices few. Many had arrived after losing jobs, families, or simply hope. Others had been promised fortune and found only debt. And while the city outside moved with progress and invention, these women were trapped in rooms where time never seemed to change. This isn't a story of scandal, it's a story of endurance, of how people survived within a system that was rigged against them, of how some found small moments of kindness in the shadows, and of how society chose to forget them once the lights went out. So tonight, dim the lights, take a deep breath, and step carefully into the narrow stairways of a Victorian brothel. Listen to the creak of the floorboards, the hum of whispered voices, the sigh of a city that judged loudly and helped quietly. Because before this night is over, you might realize the truth. You wouldn't have lasted a night in their world. The door is heavier than you expect. Its wood is dark, worn smooth by hundreds of hands that have pushed it open before you. The brass handle feels cold, even though the night is thick and warm with fog. You hesitate for a moment. The sounds of London, the horses, the laughter from the pubs, the hum of the gas lamps fade behind you as you step inside. The hallway smells of perfume and candle wax. Somewhere above, a piano plays softly, the notes slow and uneven. You don't know whether it's for comfort or for business. A woman passes by in a silk robe, her hair pinned up in loose curls. She looks you over with a quick glance that says more than words could. It's not judgment, just calculation. Who are you? What do you want? How long will you last? You've just stepped into a Victorian brothel. But this isn't the glamorous image painted in novels or gossip columns. This is survival, disguised as luxury. A world where everything, the light, the laughter, the lace, has a purpose. Every movement here has meaning, every glance a rule you haven't yet learned. The madam appears almost as if summoned by your uncertainty. She's not young, not old, but her presence fills the room like perfume. Her gown is dark, simple, but lined with the faint shimmer of wealth earned through control. She smiles, but it's the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice is smooth, rehearsed, and firm all at once. New, are you? You nod, though maybe you shouldn't have. The moment you do, you feel the weight of the house's rhythm begin to pull you in. Everything here runs on rules, spoken ones, unspoken ones, and the ones you'll only learn when you break them. She leads you down a narrow corridor lined with fading wallpaper and candlelight. Portraits of women stare down from the walls, faces from another time, perhaps once alive, perhaps only decoration. You catch the scent of gin and roses, and under it all, something metallic. The smell of coin, perhaps, or survival. This is a respectable house, she says, which you quickly learn is Victorian code for profitable and discreet. You'll be expected to keep to the rules. Meals at 7, work after dusk. You'll pay for your own clothes, your perfume, and your bed. If you fall ill, we'll see to it, but it comes out of your share. Do you understand? You don't, not fully, but you nod anyway. The room she shows you to is small, with a single candle, a narrow bed, and a cracked mirror. You can hear voices through the thin wall. Laughter, whispers, the sharp clink of glass. The floor creaks under your shoes. In one corner, a folded dress waits on a chair. It's finer than anything you've worn, but you can tell it's been passed through many hands. That's the first lesson of this place. Everything here has been used before. When the night begins, the house wakes up. The piano grows louder, the candles multiply, and the hall fills with perfume and footsteps. Some of the women move with easy grace, practiced smiles and gentle laughter. Others look tired, faces painted to hide exhaustion. They help one another with laces and ribbons, fixing hair, adjusting collars, not because they're friends, but because they have to be. Downstairs, the drawing room fills with smoke and noise. Men enter in small groups, pretending they're not nervous. Some are soldiers on leave, others merchants, clerks, or politicians, faces that blend into the crowd of the city by day. Here they come to forget, to be admired, to be seen as powerful, if only for an hour. You watch from the staircase, uncertain. The madam catches your hesitation and leans close. "Don't stare," she whispers. "Smile. Always smile. That's what they pay for." That's the second lesson. Nothing here is real. Not the laughter, not the compliments, not even the names. One of the women, Clara, takes pity on you. She's tall, her accent soft and lilting, maybe Irish. She offers a kind smile that feels real enough to hold on to. "Don't worry," she says quietly. "The first night's always the hardest. Just remember, everything here's a performance. You play your part, and you survive. That's all." As the night wears on, you begin to notice the rhythm of the house. The madam moves through the rooms like a conductor, ensuring everything runs smoothly. Laughter rises and falls in waves, glasses clink, and the piano plays the same tune over and over. The workers keep smiling, adjusting to each guest's mood. Some flirt easily, others act like companions, good listeners, confidants. But between those moments, when no one's watching, you see the cracks. A tired glance, a sigh quickly swallowed, a hand trembling as it refills a glass. Beneath the paint and powder, the exhaustion is unmistakable. And then there's the silence. The short, rare minutes between guests, when the room feels hollow and the air thick with candle smoke. That's when you start to realize that this isn't just work, it's endurance. The madam insists on discipline. No drinking too much, no talking back to guests, no personal attachments. Emotion, she says one night, is bad for business. You learn that every woman here has her own story, how she arrived, what she lost, what she's still hoping to find. Some send money home to family who pretend not to know where it comes from. Others dream of saving enough to open a small shop, though few ever do. And yet, despite it all, the house keeps running. Every night, the same routine, the same piano song, the same fog pressing against the windows. If you stayed long enough, you'd start to understand the quiet hierarchy that keeps the place alive. The madam keeps the books, the senior girls keep the peace, and everyone else learns to adapt. There's pride, too, in small ways, in how quickly someone can read a client's mood, in who gets chosen first, in who gets to rest early. You begin to see that this world, for all its hardship, runs with precision. It's not chaos, it's control. And control, here, is worth more than gold. By the time dawn begins to rise, the laughter has faded. The candles burn low, the piano has gone silent, and the air feels heavy. One by one, the women retreat to their rooms. Makeup smudged, corsets loosened, voices hoarse. Some hum softly as they remove their jewelry, a small ritual to keep the night from following them into sleep. You lie in your narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. The city outside begins to wake, but the house grows quiet. Somewhere downstairs, you hear the madam counting coins. That's when the final lesson of your first night hits you. This isn't just a place where people work. It's a place where people survive. And survival, here, doesn't come easily. Because while the rest of London dreams of progress and morality, this little house lives in its shadow, balancing on the thin line between what society hides and what it depends on. So, could you last a night here? Maybe. But to last a week, a month, a year, you'd need something stronger than courage. You'd need to learn the art of pretending, the patience of silence, and the ability to disappear behind a smile. And those are lessons that take more than one night to learn. By morning, the brothel feels different. The perfume has faded into something stale, the floorboards creak louder, and the candles have burned down to little puddles of wax. The illusion that shimmered in the dark, the laughter, the luxury, the painted smiles, all of it melts away in the daylight. What's left isn't glamour. It's the machinery of a business that runs on exhaustion and illusion. The madam sits in her office, counting money with the same focus as a banker. Coins click against the wooden desk in neat little stacks, copper, silver, gold. Each one represents a transaction, a moment, a story. For her, though, it's simple arithmetic. Pleasure has a price, and every smile in this house is an investment. Outside her door, you wait your turn. The hallway smells faintly of gin and lavender polish. Other women line up too, some silent, others whispering under their breath. Each of them will hand over their earnings, and each will receive what's left after expenses. That's the polite word for everything that keeps them indebted. Rent, dresses, soap, food, and the endless little fines that seem to appear out of nowhere. When your turn comes, the madam doesn't look up right away. She's tallying something in a small black ledger, her quill scratching across the page. Finally, she glances up. 2 shillings and 6pence, she says, flatly. That's your share for the night. You blink. That's barely enough for a decent meal in London, let alone survival. But her eyes lift, sharp as glass. You're new. You don't bring regulars yet. You're learning. Be grateful you're earning at all. You nod, swallowing your protest. She slides the coins toward you. They feel small in your hand, lighter than you expected. You realize that this place runs not just on work, but on constant debt. Every ribbon, every glass of wine, every candle used during a client's visit, all of it is charged back to the women. Clara finds you later, sitting by the window. She laughs softly when she sees your face. Let me guess, she gave you less than you thought. You nod again. She always does, Clara says. That's how it works. The house takes its share first, then what's left gets divided. You'll spend most of your life here, owing something. You stare out at the gray London street beyond the fogged window. Carriages rattle by, people hurry past, none of them looking up. They probably don't even see the building. To them, it's invisible, a secret everyone knows but pretends not to. Clara leans back against the wall, lighting a cigarette. You think men come here for love, she says with a wry smile. They come here for control. They pay to forget they're not in charge out there. You watch her as she speaks, calm, composed, almost philosophical. And what do we get, you ask? Safety, she says simply, at least for a while. But safety, you learn, is an illusion too. That evening, when the gas lamps flicker on and the piano starts again, the house transforms once more. The women become radiant, the rooms glow golden, and laughter fills the air. It's like stepping onto a stage. Every night, the same play, every role rehearsed. The men who enter act as though they've stumbled into a dream. Though some look haunted, others guilty. They drink fast, talk too loud, and cling to the idea that the world inside this house is kinder than the one outside. You begin to notice patterns. The same men return, some every week. They all have their favorites. There's the banker who insists on being called sir, the soldier who weeps after every visit, the young gentleman who talks about politics as if anyone here cares. Each woman knows her clientele like a craftsman knows her tools. Clara's soft-spoken. She listens more than she laughs. Another, called Ruby, is fire and confidence, adored by the loudest customers. Then there's Edith, quiet and pale, who disappears for days when the coughing fits get bad. The madam never asks questions. Behind the charm and the flirtation, there's a constant calculation. How long can you talk before he gets bored? How much can you make before he drinks too much? Every touch, every glance, every word has value. And yet, for all the money that flows through the house, none of it seems to stay with the women. You hear rumors of the rich madams who own entire chains of establishments across the city, women who dine with lords and wear diamonds. But in this house, the gold stays locked in the safe downstairs, and the workers stay in debt. Still, the illusion must be maintained. You're told to laugh at jokes that make no sense, to wear perfume even if it burns your skin, to smile even when your feet ache from standing too long. The piano never stops, even when the player's hands tremble with fatigue. There's a strange, quiet rhythm to it all. It's not joy, but it's order. Sometimes, when the guests are gone and the house grows silent again, you and Clara sit together by the dying fire. She tells stories about the women who came before, some who ran away, others who disappeared. One of them married a client once, she says one night. He promised her a new life. 2 months later, she was back. Turns out, she missed being important. You frown. Important? Clara smiles faintly. Here, at least, we're seen. Out there, we're invisible. It's a haunting truth. In the outside world, a woman's reputation could be destroyed with a whisper. Here, reputation meant profit, beauty meant currency, and the right charm could feed you for a week. But the cost was steep. You start to see it in their faces, the fine cracks hidden under powder, the faint tremor in hands that once moved with elegance. Nights blur together. Sometimes the guests are kind, sometimes they're cruel. The line between pleasure and humiliation thins until it almost disappears. The madam never intervenes, not unless someone breaks the rules. This is business, she reminds you again and again. You can't afford to take anything personally. One night, a new man comes in, young, charming, well-dressed. He talks to you like you're someone real, someone clever. You find yourself laughing, genuinely this time. For a moment, it feels like you've stepped out of the routine, like something human has crept into the script. But then he leaves, and the illusion collapses. He doesn't return the next night, or the one after. By the end of the week, you can't even remember his name. That's when you understand the truth of what Clara meant, that being seen here is not the same as being known. Each night, you give away little pieces of yourself, a laugh here, a smile there, until you begin to wonder how much of you is left. The economics of desire, you realize, is not about money at all. It's about power, who has it, who trades it, and who's allowed to pretend they do. And in this house, the madam holds all the power. She knows who owes what, who's falling behind, who's close to breaking. She rewards loyalty with small kindnesses, a silk ribbon, a better room, a night off. But she never lets anyone forget who owns what. The debts are written down, the favors tracked, the promises enforced with a smile. One night, as the house winds down, you pass her office and glimpse her through the door. She's sitting at her desk, staring at the ledger. Her face, usually unreadable, looks suddenly tired. For just a second, she looks like any other woman. Someone who built a fortress out of necessity, not greed. Maybe she was once like you. Maybe she still is. But by morning, she'll be herself again. Composed, confident, untouchable. The house will open, the women will laugh, and the business will continue. And you'll take your place among them, performing your part in the endless cycle, selling smiles in exchange for survival, trading warmth for coins that never seem to add up. Because in Victorian London, where even love has a price, desire isn't a feeling. It's an industry. You learn the rules quickly, not because someone teaches you, but because the house itself enforces them. Every sound, every glance, every hesitation whispers what's expected. The women move with practiced grace, their steps soft but certain. They know which rooms to enter, which doors to avoid, which silences mean safety. The madam doesn't shout, not often. Her power is quieter, colder. She can end someone's livelihood with a single raised eyebrow. Every woman here knows that one misstep, a missed appointment, a stolen drink, a careless insult, could mean losing her place. And in a city like London, losing your place meant falling off the edge of the world. Your first morning, you're handed a list of rules written in elegant, looping script. The paper smells faintly of rosewater and ink, but the message beneath is far from gentle. Rule 1. Respect the house. Rule 2. Respect the guests. Rule 3. Respect yourself, but never more than the guest. You read that last one twice. It's strange, you think, to be told to keep your dignity, but only in small doses. It feels like walking on a wire. Too proud, and you're called difficult. Too quiet, and you're forgotten. Below those, more rules follow. Don't refuse a guest unless he breaks the code of conduct. Don't drink before nightfall. Don't gossip about the clients, no matter how strange their habits. Always smile. Always speak softly. Always leave your door open a crack so the madam can listen if she needs to. The list ends with one final warning. Those who bring trouble to the house will find themselves outside it by morning. That part everyone takes seriously. The rhythm of life inside the brothel follows those rules like clockwork. Morning begins with washing. Buckets of cold water, soap that burns the skin, and quick repairs to the gowns and corsets that must look perfect again by nightfall. Then comes breakfast. Tea, bread, maybe an egg if the cook's in a kind mood. After that, the house falls into a peculiar quiet. Some women sleep, others sit by the windows, sewing lace or reading faded romance novels left behind by guests. You learn to use these hours to prepare, fixing your hair, pressing dresses, retouching the paint on your nails. Even silence is part of the performance. You're expected to rest in a way that looks graceful, to lounge without seeming lazy. Every move, every breath is part of the illusion that by nightfall will turn exhaustion into elegance. But the rules go deeper than what's written on paper. There's a social order among the women, unspoken but strict. At the top are the favorites, the ones with regular clients and higher rates. They dress in the best fabrics, eat better meals, and sometimes dine with the madam herself. Then come the middle ranks, steady workers, reliable, neither adored nor forgotten. And below them, the newcomers and the unfortunates, the ones too shy, too proud, or too sick to draw the crowds. You belong here, for now. Clara, ever watchful, explains it one evening while brushing her hair in front of the mirror. The house doesn't choose who's valuable, she says. The guests do. But once the madam sees who brings in the money, that's where her loyalty goes. You glance at her reflection. And what happens when someone stops bringing in money? She pauses, the brush still in her hand. They disappear. You wait for her to laugh, to say she's joking. She doesn't. By night, the rules become more visible. The women descend the staircase one by one, each like a different shade of light. The madam watches from below, eyes scanning for anything out of place, a stain, a tear, a nervous glance. She doesn't speak much before the guests arrive, but when she does, her words are law. Keep the laughter low, she says one evening. No arguments tonight. Mr. Harcourt is bringing a friend, and I won't have a scene. Everyone nods. That's how it always goes. You learn that certain men are protected. Men of status or influence, the kind whose favor keeps the house in business. When they arrive, the atmosphere changes. Conversation grows more careful, the wine is poured faster, the smiles come easier. These are not men you can afford to displease. One of them, A tall gentleman with a velvet coat and a gold ring looks at you a little too long. Later, the madam calls you aside. "Smile at him more," she says quietly. "He's generous when treated well." You nod, and that's that. The unspoken rule: your comfort is negotiable, but the guest's isn't. There are, of course, punishments. The house doesn't use violence, at least not openly, but shame can cut deeper than any whip. A careless remark in front of a client earns a public scolding. A broken glass might cost you your dinner. And if someone's found drinking on credit or stealing perfume from another's shelf, the whole house knows by dawn. One night, you see it happen. A girl named Faye, small, timid, barely 20, returns late from an appointment. The madam stands waiting in the parlor, her face calm, her voice low. "You kept him waiting," she says. Faye stammers something about a broken carriage wheel, but it doesn't matter. The madam announces, for all to hear, that Faye's wages will be halved for the week. Then she orders her to serve tea to the guests as punishment. Faye's cheeks flush crimson, but she obeys. No one looks at her, no one intervenes. The rule is simple: if it isn't your trouble, don't make it yours. Later, Clara whispers, "It's not about the tea. It's about the example." You realize she's right. The madam doesn't need to raise her voice. The fear of losing one's place does all the work for her. Still, some rules are broken quietly, when the madam isn't looking. The women share bread after hours, slip each other ribbons, whisper jokes that would make the clients blush. Sometimes they even protect one another, though never openly. There's an unspoken sisterhood beneath the rivalry, fragile, cautious, but real. In a world built on appearances, small kindnesses become lifelines. A shared comb, a warm glance, a whispered warning about a rough guest. Clara once tells you, "No one outside this house will ever understand us. But inside, we look out for our own, at least the ones who deserve it." You wonder if she counts you among them. Then there are the rules that no one dares write down. The ones about the police, the inspectors, the city officials who sometimes come knocking. When they do, the madam greets them with her best smile and a discreet envelope. The visit never lasts long. You ask Clara once why the law turns a blind eye. She laughs softly. Because the law visits here too. The hypocrisy of it all is dizzying. Outside, society preaches morality, handing out pamphlets about purity and sin. Inside, those same men pay for the very vices they condemn, and every coin they spend keeps the system running. You begin to see the rules for what they are, not guidelines, but a cage disguised as order. One foggy morning, you wake to shouting downstairs. The air smells of rain and stale smoke. When you reach the hall, you see the madam standing with two men in uniform. They're arguing quietly, though you can't hear the words. Faye stands nearby, pale and trembling. Her suitcase is open, clothes spilling out. You don't need to ask what happened. She's being dismissed. Later, Clara tells you the story in a low voice. Faye had spoken to a client outside the house, a gentleman who wanted to see her privately. That was against the rules. The madam found out and acted fast. Why, you ask? Wouldn't that have been good business? Clara shakes her head. Not if she lost control of him. The madam doesn't like what she can't manage. You glance toward Faye's empty room. The bed is still unmade. Her hairbrush sits on the dresser. By evening, someone else will sleep there, and no one will mention her name again. That's another rule. Forget the ones who leave. It's easier that way. By now, you've memorized the rules, but you also understand their real purpose. They're not about discipline, they're about survival. For the house, for the madam, for everyone inside. Without them, chaos would spill in through the doors. The men would take too much, the debts would rise, the police would notice. The house stands only because it runs like a machine. Every woman a cog, every gesture rehearsed. And though you follow each rule perfectly, a quiet rebellion begins to grow inside you. You start to question things, why you can't keep your own earnings, why your name can't exist outside these walls, why survival always feels like submission. But you keep those questions to yourself, because in this place, curiosity can be dangerous. For now, you smile, you play your part, and you stay invisible, because that's the first rule that every woman here learns, even if it's never written down. To last in a Victorian brothel, you must disappear inside your own reflection. By evening, the fog has thickened. The lamps outside burn low and golden, turning the cobblestones into mirrors. Somewhere down the street, a carriage wheel splashes through a puddle, and laughter echoes from a nearby pub. Inside the brothel, the atmosphere changes like the tightening of a string. The air grows warmer, the lights softer, the scent of perfume stronger. Candles flicker in the hallways, painting the walls in amber shadows. The piano starts its slow, familiar tune, something cheerful enough to comfort, but quiet enough to hide the tension beneath. This is the hour when the guests arrive. The women know their cues. Dresses are adjusted, hair smoothed, jewelry straightened. Voices drop to pleasant tones. Laughter is practiced, but never loud. The madam descends the staircase with the calm of someone who knows that every coin tonight depends on appearances. She takes her place near the door, her ledger hidden under a lace cloth. When the knock comes, always 3 firm taps, she opens it with a smile that never falters. And the night begins. The first to arrive are the familiar ones, merchants with trimmed beards and tired eyes. They come for routine, not excitement. They talk about trade, about their wives who don't understand them, about the weather. Some are kind in a distant way. Others talk too much and listen too little. You learn quickly how to read them. The nervous ones smile too much. The proud ones never remove their gloves. The dangerous ones are quiet until you make a mistake. Never rush a man through the door, Clara whispers to you once as the guests start filtering in. Let him feel like he's discovering something. They like to think they're in control. So you wait, you smile, you let the game unfold. Each client is a small world unto himself. There's the young officer who insists on being called sir even when he's off duty, his hands trembling slightly as he counts out his coins. There's the playwright who quotes his own lines as though they were scripture. There's the banker who never looks anyone in the eye but leaves generous tips as if they might buy him absolution. And then there are the ones who come not for pleasure but for escape. Men whose faces look hollow under the candlelight, whose laughter sounds rehearsed. They speak of nothing for long stretches of time, and when they do, it's always about the past. You start to realize that the house sells many things, but the most valuable of all is illusion. The illusion of power, of affection, of importance. The illusion that, for a few hours, the outside world doesn't exist. You watch Clara work one evening, studying how she moves through the room. She never forces attention. It comes to her naturally. She laughs softly, leans in just enough to seem interested, and listens as if every word matters. She makes them feel seen, even when she's miles away behind her smile. "That's the trick," she tells you later, wiping powder from her cheeks in the mirror. "You don't sell your body, not really. You sell the story that they matter. That's what keeps them coming back." You ask her if it ever feels false. She smirks, just a little. Of course it's false, but that doesn't mean it isn't real to them. Not all clients are gentle. Some treat the house like a stage where they can perform their worst selves. They test the boundaries, press too close, demand too much. The madam handles them quietly, firmly. A word here, a glare there, and most back down. The ones who don't, well, they simply stop being welcome. You see one such man escorted out by the doorman one night. He's red-faced, drunk, muttering about respect. The door closes behind him, and the room exhales in relief. But no one celebrates. In this world, even victory is temporary. Then there are the strange ones, the collectors, the storytellers, the ones who come seeking something you can't quite name. One man, pale and thin, asks if he can read aloud while you listen. He brings a stack of papers and trembles as he turns the pages. His voice shakes, but his words are beautiful. Verses about loneliness, loss, and love that never happened. You realize he's not reading someone else's work. These are his own. When he finishes, he bows awkwardly and leaves without touching the wine. Another man pays simply to sit by the fire in silence. He stares at the flames, hands clasped, lips moving as if in prayer. After half an hour, he stands, leaves a small tip, and disappears into the fog. No one asks what he's praying for. By midnight, the air feels heavy with perfume and heat. The piano plays faster now, the laughter louder, the candlelight brighter. The guests mingle freely, trading jokes and glances. For a moment, it almost looks like a ballroom, if you forget where you are. You're paired with a merchant who smells of tobacco and brandy. He talks about his voyages, his ships, the wealth he's built. He asks you questions, but doesn't wait for the answers. He laughs too loudly, as though trying to convince himself he's happy. He compliments your hair, your dress, your voice, the same words you've heard a dozen times before. You laugh in the right places, nod when you should, pour his drink when the glass grows empty. It feels almost like acting, and maybe it is. At one point, you catch a reflection of yourself in the glass cabinet. Painted face, jeweled hair, a stranger smiling back. You realize the house has already begun to shape you. You've learned to move gracefully, to hide tiredness, to filter every emotion before it reaches your face. You look older somehow. Not in years, but in understanding. This world has its own kind of gravity. It pulls you in slowly, quietly, until you can't remember what normal used to feel like. Later, when the music softens and the guests begin to leave, the house breathes again. The madam stands at the door, thanking each man by name, her ledger resting on the table beside her. Coins change hands discreetly. Promises are made for future visits. When the last guest steps out into the fog, the silence feels almost sacred. The women sit together in the parlor, removing earrings, loosening corsets, stretching aching legs. Someone pours the last of the wine into chicked glasses. The laughter now is real, if tired. That one nearly fell asleep mid-sentence, Clara says, and the room bursts into quiet laughter. For a few minutes, the rules soften. The house feels like home, fragile, fleeting, but real enough to keep them going. The madam enters then, her smile thin but approving. She counts the night's earnings in neat, precise stacks, marking figures in her book. "Well done tonight," she says. "No trouble, no noise, just how I like it." She looks at you briefly. "You did well too. You're learning." You nod, though her praise feels like a reminder. Because here, success means invisibility, blending in, never standing out too much, never becoming a problem. As the candles burn low, you find yourself alone for a moment, sitting by the window. Outside, the city glows faintly through the fog. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings. You think about the men who came tonight, their faces, their voices, their loneliness. You think about how easily they slip in and out of this place, leaving the women to clean the silence they leave behind. And you wonder, quietly, if they ever think about you at all. Probably not. But that's the secret no one ever says aloud. In this house, forgetting is part of the service. By dawn, the city will erase the memory of this night. The men will return to their wives, their offices, their polished lives. The women will sleep for a few short hours before the whole act begins again. And somewhere between the fog and the candlelight, you realize something unsettling, that the clients aren't the only ones pretending. You are too. You're pretending this life hasn't already begun to change you. Morning light in a brothel is never kind. It leaks through the thin curtains like an intruder, showing every smudge, every stain, every secret that the night worked so hard to hide. The perfume has faded. The air smells of candle wax, wine, and exhaustion. The laughter that filled the parlor just hours ago has dissolved into soft snores and the occasional murmur from a dream. The beauty that dazzled under candlelight now lies scattered across the floor, a broken hairpin here, a smudge of rouge on a handkerchief, a corset half unlaced and forgotten. For the women of the house, beauty is not a gift, it's a burden, one that demands payment every single day. You wake before the others because sleep comes lightly here. Your body aches from the stiffness of the bed and the stiffness of pretending. Your face still feels like it's wearing the mask of last night's smile. On the dressing table sits the enemy, the mirror. By candlelight, it flatters. By daylight, it betrays. You lean closer, studying the reflection that looks back. The powder has settled into fine lines that weren't there before. Your eyes, red-rimmed from smoke and sleeplessness, make you look older than you are. You dip a cloth into the basin and start to clean your face. The water turns pink from rouge and cold cream. Beneath the makeup, your skin looks pale and tired, almost ghostly. Clara shuffles past your door, yawning. "You'll learn," she says without stopping. "Beauty's a game. The trick is never letting them see what's underneath." Downstairs, the madam is already awake. She's sitting at the long table with her ledger open, spectacles perched on her nose, a cup of black tea beside her. She glances up when you enter. "You were paired with the merchant last night, yes?" You nod. "He'll be back," she says flatly, jotting something in her book. "He asked for you by name." You try to smile, because that's what you're supposed to do, but inside, the words feel like a weight. Returning clients means steady income. Steady income means safety. But it also means you've been chosen. not for who you are, but for the illusion you sell best. Beauty in the Victorian brothel isn't just appearance, it's currency. The madam measures it the way bankers measure gold, with precision, strategy, and control. Every feature has value. Pale skin suggests refinement. Dark hair is exotic, but only if it's neatly styled. Eyes too sharp make men uneasy. Eyes too dull make them bored. It's a market, and the product must always look flawless. So the morning ritual begins. The girls gather in the dressing room, still half asleep, and set to work. Powder, rouge, kohl, perfume. The smell of rose water mixes with cigarette smoke. Someone hums a tune to fill the silence. Don't use too much, Clara says to you as you apply powder. Men like the illusion of natural beauty. They don't want to think it's painted on, even though they all know it is. You glance at her reflection. She's brushing her hair with careful, practiced strokes, her eyes unreadable. How long have you been here? You ask. She pauses, counting silently. Long enough to know that beauty doesn't last, but debt does. The madam enters, scanning the room. Don't waste my rouge, she says sharply to one of the newer girls. That costs more than you earn in a night. She moves like a general inspecting troops before battle. She adjusts a ribbon here, smooths a collar there. Her gaze is clinical. She's not looking at people, she's checking merchandise. When she stops behind you, you hold your breath. Smile, she says. You do. Good. Keep that one. It hides the nerves. And then she's gone. There's a strange hierarchy to beauty in this house. The young ones, the fresh faces, get the best clients and the finest gowns. They laugh loudly, drink freely, and believe they'll escape someday. The older ones, though, the ones with faint lines at the corners of their eyes, know better. They've learned to weaponize elegance, to turn wit and restraint into their own kind of allure. They no longer try to compete with youth. They outsmart it. And then there are those in between, too old to be new, too young to be revered. They're the most vulnerable. Their value slips quietly like sand through an hourglass, and no one warns them until it's already gone. You start to wonder which group you belong to. In the afternoon, a woman named Lydia sits beside you, sewing a loose seam on her bodice. She's older, perhaps in her 30s, with auburn hair and sharp, knowing eyes. You're still learning, she says, not unkindly. Let me give you a word of advice. You nod. Never get used to compliments. They're like sugar, sweet for a moment, but they rot you if you believe them too long. You smile faintly. And what about beauty? She laughs softly. Beauty's a curse, darling. It gets you through the door, but it never lets you leave. Evening comes again, as it always does. The house transforms. Music, perfume, candlelight. The women take their places. But now you see the effort behind the glamour. Every smile hides hunger or pain. Every twirl of hair, every flutter of a fan is calculated. You begin to notice how the women glance at one another, measuring. Who's catching more eyes tonight? Who's falling out of favor? The competition is silent but constant. In this house, you don't fight for love. You fight for survival. Clara once told you that the worst thing a woman here can do is grow invisible. When men stop noticing you, the madam starts thinking about replacements. So the mirror becomes your enemy and your savior. A cruel friend that tells the truth no one else dares to say. Late that night, a wealthy gentleman arrives, a man with a gold watch and a polished accent. The madam greets him personally. He surveys the room, his eyes slow, assessing. You feel his gaze pause on you. The madam notices. "Ah, she's one of our newer girls," she says smoothly. "Quite the favorite already." You force a smile, though your stomach tightens. The man nods. "I'll have her then." He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't even look at you when he says it. And just like that, your value for the night is decided. The rest of the evening passes in a blur of conversation and candlelight. He talks mostly about himself, his business, his travels, his disappointments. You listen, nodding in all the right places. When he finally leaves, you feel hollow. The mirror in the corner catches your reflection again, and you hardly recognize the woman staring back. The rouge is smeared, the powder clings to your skin. The illusion has cracked, and beneath it, the truth looks raw and tired. You wipe your face clean with the back of your hand and whisper to the mirror, half in jest, half in desperation. "How much longer do you think I can keep this up?" The mirror, of course, doesn't answer. After the house quiets down, Clara finds you sitting on the edge of your bed. She doesn't speak right away. She just lights a cigarette, takes a slow drag, and exhales toward the ceiling. "Do you ever feel like you're disappearing?" you ask softly. She smiles sadly. "Every day. But that's what they pay us for, isn't it? To disappear just long enough for them to believe we're real." You both sit in silence, the smoke curling like ghosts around the candle flame. Beauty, you realize, is both a weapon and a wound. It opens doors and locks them behind you. In this house, it decides everything: your clients, your earnings, your survival. But it also steals something precious with every passing night, the part of you that once looked in the mirror and saw more than a product. And as the candle burns lower, you understand what Lydia meant. Beauty in the Victorian brothel isn't about being seen. It's about learning how to vanish, gracefully, profitably, completely. There are doors in the brothel you're not supposed to open. They're not locked, not really, but they carry a quiet warning. You feel it in the way the other women glance at them, the way conversation drops when someone lingers too long near the stairs that lead to the upper floor. Every house like this has its secrets. Behind the velvet curtains, past the painted smiles and the perfume, lies the machinery that keeps it all running, and the truth that no one ever tells the guests. It starts with a sound, a soft click as the madam closes her office door. You're walking by when you hear her voice, low and careful. She's speaking to someone, a man, judging by the deep rumble of his replies. You catch only fragments, numbers, schedules, a name you don't recognize. "2 new girls next week," she says. "Yes, from the East End. They'll be easier to manage." You move on quickly. Eavesdropping here is dangerous. But the words follow you down the hall like a draft of cold air. Easier to manage. You've learned by now that this house runs on more than just money. It runs on control. In the early evening, while the others rest, Lydia sits across from you, sewing a ribbon onto her gown. "Have you ever wondered where the money goes?" she asks. You glance up. "To the madam?" She smirks. "Only partly. The real owners never show their faces. Gentlemen investors, they call them. The same men who come here pretending to be customers. The madam just keeps the books and the girls in line. You blink, surprised. You mean, yes, this place doesn't belong to her. Lydia knots her thread. It belongs to the same people who denounce us in public. That's the joke, you see. Respectable men always find a way to profit from sin, as long as someone else takes the blame. You sit back, trying to absorb the thought. The brothel feels different suddenly. Less like a refuge, more like a stage set built to hide the hands pulling the strings. Later, when the lamps are lit, Clara takes you aside. "You'll hear things in this house," she says quietly. "Things you won't understand. Don't ask questions. The madam notices everything." Her eyes flick toward the curtain separating the parlor from the back corridor. And whatever you do, don't go behind that curtain at night. Why? She hesitates. Because not everything that happens here is meant for us to see. That night, business is brisk. The parlor hums with laughter and music. The air grows heavy with cigar smoke and wine. You play your part, smiling, dancing, pretending not to notice the way the men's conversations dip into whispers whenever the madam passes by. She's everywhere at once, gliding between tables, adjusting a ribbon here, offering a drink there. Her eyes flick like candlelight, sharp and unreadable. Around midnight, you catch sight of something strange. Two men, well-dressed, with the look of officials, slip behind the velvet curtain Clara warned you about. The madam follows them, her expression suddenly hard. Curiosity gets the better of you. You edge closer, pretending to fetch more wine. From where you stand, you can just see the curtain's edge shift. Behind it lies a narrow hallway leading to a locked door. You hear muffled voices, then a sound like coins being counted. The conversation ends quickly. The men leave without a word, their pockets a little heavier. The madam returns, calm as ever, smoothing her skirts as though nothing happened. When she passes you, her eyes meet yours, and for a second, you're certain she knows you saw. After the guests depart, the house falls quiet again. The women retreat to their rooms, tired and heavy-eyed. You stay awake, staring at the curtain. What could be so secret that even the girls aren't allowed to see? The next morning, you ask Lydia, carefully. She sighs. You're too curious for your own good, but since you've already seen the curtain, you might as well know. That's where she keeps the ledger. Not the one she shows the police, the real one. You frown. A secret book? Every madam has one, Lydia says. It lists debts, clients, arrangements, everything. If the wrong person got hold of it, the entire house could collapse overnight. She threads her needle again, voice dropping lower. Some say she keeps letters, too, from politicians, officers, even judges. They pay her well to make sure their names never leave that room. You sit in stunned silence. The velvet curtain, once just decoration, now feels like the boundary between two worlds, the world of those who sell illusion and the world of those who buy secrecy. Days pass and the routine continues, dressing, entertaining, pretending, yet you can't shake the image of the hidden room. The more you think about it, the more the brothel begins to feel like a maze built from lies. One evening, as the others prepare for the night's guests, the madam calls for you. "In my office," she says, without looking up. You obey, heart pounding. She gestures for you to sit. On her desk lies an open notebook, a small pile of banknotes, and a sealed envelope. "You've done well lately," she says. "A good attitude, reliable clients. I like that." "Thank you, ma'am." She studies you for a long moment, her fingers drumming softly on the wood. "Curiosity," she says finally, "isn't always a virtue in a house like this. You understand me?" You nod quickly. Her lips curl into a faint smile. "Good. Then we won't have a problem." She closes the notebook, and the conversation is over. You walk out trembling, unsure whether you've just been warned or protected. That night, you tell Clara what happened. She exhales sharply. "She knows," she says. "She always knows." "About the curtain?" "About everything. She runs this house like a captain runs a ship, and she's survived longer than most. Don't cross her. No matter how tempting it is to look behind those doors, you might not like what you find." You nod, but her words only deepen your curiosity. A few weeks later, an incident shakes the house. One of the younger girls, Anna, disappears. No one sees her leave. Her things remain neatly folded at the foot of her bed. The madam says she found other work, but the tone of her voice silences any questions. That night, when you pass the curtain, you notice something new. A faint, reddish stain on the carpet near its edge. Small, almost hidden, but impossible to ignore. You tell yourself it's spilled wine. You want to believe it's spilled wine. But Lydia's face when she sees it says otherwise. Rumors begin to circulate. Some say Anna ran off with a client. Others whisper that she knew too much, that she saw something behind the curtain she shouldn't have. The madam never mentions her again. Her name is crossed out in the ledger. Her room is cleaned and soon given to someone new. And life continues, as though she'd never existed. One stormy night, when thunder shakes the windows, the madam gathers the girls in the parlor. She speaks calmly but firmly. "The police will be conducting visits this week," she says. "Routine checks, nothing more. Be polite, say as little as possible." You exchange a glance with Clara. Everyone knows these visits aren't about morality. They're about money. The officers come and go, pockets lined, eyes averted. The curtain remains drawn. Behind it, the house keeps its silence. Weeks later, you overhear Lydia telling a new girl a story, a kind of legend among the women. They say that years ago, before this place was grand, it was just a lodging house. The madam worked here then too, under another name. One night, a man tried to cheat her, refused to pay, hit one of the girls. He vanished afterward. The next day, she hung new curtains. The new girl laughs nervously. "You mean—" Lydia shrugs. "Who knows? In this city, justice is rare, but revenge is common." The conversation drifts away, but the story lingers. You look again toward the velvet curtain and wonder how much of the brothel's peace is built on fear. By now, you've learned that survival here means pretending not to notice. You smile when told, laugh when expected, and keep your eyes forward. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, you think about the missing girl, the hidden ledger, and the madam's knowing smile. And you understand that the real danger in this house isn't the clients or the long nights, it's the secrets. The velvet curtain isn't just fabric, it's a warning, a reminder that in a place built on illusion, truth is the one thing no one can afford. The air feels heavier than usual tonight. The fog outside has thickened, curling around the gas lamps like pale fingers trying to pry open doors. Inside the brothel, the warmth of candlelight does little to ease the tension that has settled over the rooms. Something in the atmosphere tells you that tonight will be different, though you cannot name why. Even before the first guests arrive, the women move with a sense of unease. Dresses are smoothed, necklaces adjusted, and smiles polished to a practiced perfection. But behind the surface, a quiet war rages, small, almost imperceptible, between fear, anticipation, and the ever-present knowledge of what could happen if the night goes wrong. You stand by the parlor doorway, observing, learning. Every movement here has purpose. Every gesture is calculated. Every glance matters. The first knock on the door is sharp, urgent. 3 taps. The madam opens it with a composed smile, greeting the man outside with the kind of politeness that belies the wealth and danger he carries. A merchant, by the look of him, with a neatly trimmed beard and the faint scent of brandy clinging to his coat. He steps inside, glancing around as though this is his stage and he the only actor who truly matters. The merchant is polite at first, chatting about trivialities, the weather, the markets, his wife. But soon the conversation turns, as it always does, toward expectation. He doesn't see the women here as people. He sees them as performances, as distractions carefully curated for his pleasure. You watch as Clara approaches him, her smile flawless, her movements fluid. She leans in just enough to seem interested, listens intently to the nonsense he pours out, and makes him feel as though his life story is important. And in a way, it is. To her, this performance is survival. The merchant eventually leaves, satisfied, his coin paid, his ego inflated. Another hour passes. Another client arrives, and another. The night stretches ahead like an endless corridor, each hour weighted with expectation, each minute demanding perfection. But not every guest is ordinary. Some are strange, dangerous, or unpredictable. One man comes in wearing a military uniform, the brass of his buttons gleaming in the candlelight. He carries himself with authority, but there is a restless, almost feral energy in his gaze. He doesn't speak much, only watches, evaluates. When he finally chooses a companion for the evening, not you, but one of the older women, you feel a chill. The room seems smaller, the air heavier, as though the walls themselves are aware of the tension he brings. Later, a writer arrives. His hands are stained with ink, and his coat smells of damp parchment. He talks incessantly, quoting his own work as though it were scripture. He expects praise, admiration, and attention, and when he doesn't receive it, his temper flares just enough to make everyone aware of their precarious position. You've learned to listen, to nod at the right times, to laugh softly when expected, but even in these small interactions, you feel the weight of the night pressing down. Midnight arrives, and with it, the most challenging part of any evening, the final wave of guests. These are not the polite merchants or timid officers. These are the men who come with nothing but expectation and entitlement. They do not bargain with charm or stories. They expect perfection without pause, without hesitation. One such man, a large, imposing figure with a booming voice, demands immediate attention. He does not wait for introduction or courtesy. The madam approaches him calmly, her voice soft but commanding. He laughs, a harsh, hollow sound, clearly amused by the audacity of being denied instant gratification. But the madam does not flinch. Her gaze is steady, her posture unwavering. In this room, she is the one who dictates the rules. You are paired with him briefly, observing the tension, the give and take. It is a delicate dance. One wrong word, one misplaced gesture, and the illusion could shatter. You understand, in this moment, the real danger of this house. It is not violence or law, but the constant pressure to perform without falter, to please without complaint, to survive without showing fear. The hours stretch longer. Candlelight flickers across pale faces and polished floorboards. The laughter of guests echoes faintly in the halls, mixing with music from the piano and the low murmurs of conversation. You notice how carefully the women move. Every step deliberate, every gesture measured. Even a yawn must be hidden, even a tired sigh suppressed. You see Clara pacing briefly between rooms, checking on each guest with a practiced eye. She offers comfort where needed, corrects minor mistakes without drawing attention, and manages to make it all seem effortless. Watching her, you realize that skill here is invisible. The better you are, the less anyone notices the effort. There is a rhythm to the night, a pattern that emerges if you watch closely. First come the polite and curious, then the insistent and demanding, followed by the strange and unpredictable, and finally, the dangerous. Each type requires a different approach, a different kind of performance. Each has its own rhythm, its own danger, its own reward. You feel the weight of it pressing down on your shoulders. You understand now why so many fail in this profession so quickly. It is not merely about charm or appearance. It is about endurance, about emotional precision, about constant awareness. It is about surviving the night while remaining invisible, perfect, untouchable, and never letting the guests know how fragile you truly are. By 3 a.m., the final client leaves, the air heavy with spent perfume and wax. The house exhales as the madam closes the door behind him. Coins are counted, notes exchanged, and the ledger updated with the night's earnings. Everything returns to silence, as though the night had never happened. The women gather in the parlor, exhausted, removing their corsets and stretching stiff limbs. Someone pours wine from a dusty bottle, the laughter now real, if quiet. There is a moment of relief, a fragile peace, before the day begins again. Clara sits beside you, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "That was a long one," she says softly. "The night always feels longer when you're learning." You nod, unable to speak. Words would betray the exhaustion, the relief, and the unspoken truth that surviving this night was only a small victory in a much longer war. The brothel has its own rules, its own hierarchy, its own rhythm. It is a world of illusion, control, and endurance. Each night is a test, a measure of skill, patience, and resilience. Beauty alone is never enough. Charm and wit can only carry you so far. The true measure of a woman here is how she navigates the invisible currents, how she survives the demands of those who believe they hold the power. And tonight, you have survived. But survival is fragile. The fog outside thickens again, curling around the lamps and streets. The city does not sleep. The world beyond the velvet curtains is waiting, indifferent, and relentless. You understand now, more than ever, that the longest night is not measured by hours. It is measured by the endurance of the spirit, the precision of performance, and the ability to vanish without leaving a trace. You have learned something vital tonight, that in this house, invisibility is the highest skill, and every woman here has mastered it, at a cost you are only beginning to understand. The house feels alive in a way that isn't comforting. Every creak of the floorboards, every shuffle of feet, every faint laugh from a distant room reminds you that it never truly sleeps. Even when the doors are closed and the candles burn low, the house hums with secrets, half-whispered conversations, and the invisible presence of past nights. Tonight, the corridors seem longer. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the walls, curling around the staircases and doors like fingers searching for hidden truths. The air smells of candle wax, perfume, and the faint tang of spilled wine. It's intoxicating, suffocating, and relentless all at once. You walk slowly, practicing the quiet steps that keep you invisible. Each woman in the house knows this rhythm. You have to move like air, present but unnoticed. A smile must be ready at all times, your voice soft, your hands steady. One misstep, one careless glance, and you risk attracting attention you do not want. And yet, in these corridors, attention finds you regardless. Clara leans against the wall near the staircase, her expression unreadable. She doesn't greet you, but her eyes follow your every step. She's seen every kind of guest, every type of incident, every kind of mistake, and she knows which ones are fatal. You hear them? She asks softly, as if the walls themselves might be listening. Hear what? The whispers, she says. Always there, behind the curtains, down the hall, in the parlor. The clients think it's just idle chatter, but it's not. It's the house reminding you who holds the power. You glance toward the parlor. Sure enough, faint murmurs rise from behind the velvet curtains, carrying secrets, requests, and demands. They are muffled but unmistakable. You realize that the whispers are not just the voices of the guests. They are the echoes of the house itself, a memory of every deal, every betrayal, every victory, every fear. Later, as the first guests of the night arrive, the tension thickens. Men in coats and hats, their pockets heavy with coins and expectations, step through the door. Their eyes sweep the room like predators assessing prey. Some laugh, some mutter to themselves, some barely notice the women who line the walls in perfect formation, waiting to be chosen. You take your place, your posture flawless, your smile ready, but you cannot ignore the whispers that cling to the corridors. They fill the spaces between the music, between the clinking glasses, between polite conversation. They remind you of everything that happens when the lights dim and the doors close, of deals made in private rooms, favors owed and collected, secrets that could ruin a life in a single night. Clara sidles up beside you, her voice low. Some nights, you have to listen more than you talk. Pay attention to the whispers. They tell you more than the clients ever will. You nod, trying to catch every nuance. The whispers are almost like another language, subtle, coded, full of meaning if you know how to interpret them. A shift in tone, a pause before a laugh, a cough at the wrong moment. Each carries information about power, preference, and danger. By midnight, the house is in full swing. The music plays, the guests laugh and chatter, and the women move gracefully through the rooms, attending to their clients with perfect timing. But behind it all, the whispers never stop. They slither through the hallways like unseen rivers, brushing past doors, curling around corners, settling in empty chairs. One particular whisper catches your attention. It's faint, almost lost beneath the music, but insistent. A client speaks to the madam in hushed tones, words you can barely make out. Are the new girls ready? The madam replies evenly, her voice calm and authoritative, but there is an undercurrent, a quiet warning, a hint of control that makes it clear who runs the house. You realize that behind every laugh, every polite conversation, every performance, there is another layer, a network of unseen influence, of silent hierarchies, of secrets whispered only in the shadows. A young girl, no more than 17, enters the parlor nervously. She is new, and the house has already taken its toll on her posture, her expression, her hands. The whispers seem to converge around her, testing her, sizing her up. You watch as Clara guides her through the first interaction. Keep your head high, smile, nod when necessary, she instructs, and never, ever listen to what they whisper about you. Pretend it doesn't exist. But you notice that even Clara flinches when a particularly harsh whisper brushes past them. Even the most experienced women are not immune to the power of these hidden currents. Hours pass. Guests come and go. Some are satisfied quickly. Some linger, demanding attention and conversation. Each woman plays her part, adapting to the rhythms of the night, interpreting the whispers as they come. You see how the seasoned ones, Clara, Lydia, and a few others, move with ease, understanding the hidden language, the unspoken rules. You, however, are still learning. Every step is a careful calculation. Every glance must be precise. Every smile, every laugh, every gesture must conceal fear, exhaustion, and vulnerability. Late into the night, a scandal nearly erupts. A guest grows frustrated, his temper flaring. He mutters a threat, sharp and barely audible, aimed at one of the newer girls. The madam intervenes with practiced grace, diffusing the situation with a few well-chosen words and a commanding glance. You notice how the whispers shift. They carry tension, unease, and fear, but also the knowledge that the madam holds absolute control. Even the loudest, most aggressive voices are tempered by the invisible authority of the house itself. By the early hours of the morning, the corridors are quieter. The whispers are still there, softer now, but persistent. You realize that the house itself never sleeps. It remembers every action, every word, every mistake, and it waits, always waiting for the next moment when someone falters. You sit in your room, exhausted, listening to the faint echoes that drift through the walls. Every sound, every whisper, is a reminder of the delicate balance that keeps this place running. Survival is not just about charm or beauty. It is about awareness, subtlety, and understanding the invisible language of the house. As dawn approaches, you feel a mix of relief and apprehension. You have survived another night. You have listened to the whispers, learned their patterns, and moved carefully through the corridors. But the lessons are far from over. The house holds more secrets than you can imagine, and the whispers promise that there are nights to come that will test every skill, every instinct, every ounce of courage you possess. You finally close your eyes, letting the candlelight flicker against the walls, carrying the whispers with it. And you know that tomorrow you will rise again to face the long corridors, the velvet curtains, and the unseen currents of power that flow through the heart of the brothel. The brothel runs on rules that are invisible to anyone outside its walls. To the guests, it seems like a place of laughter, music, and polite company. To the women, it is a complex ecosystem governed by hierarchy, loyalty, and the quiet threat of disaster. Every day, every hour, every interaction is shaped by laws you cannot read in books, laws that must be learned through observation, intuition, and hard experience. Some rules are simple. Never refuse a client. Never draw attention to your mistakes. Never show fear. Others are more subtle. Who gets which clients, how much conversation is allowed, when to laugh, when to cry, when to flirt, when to remain silent. You begin to understand that survival here requires more than charm and beauty. It demands mastery of the house itself, an awareness of currents that move just beneath the surface. Clara explains one of the first hidden rules to you as you prepare for the evening. The clients may be paying, but they do not control everything. The madam controls everything. Learn that first, and you'll survive longer than most. It sounds simple, but you realize it is the foundation of the entire house. Every decision, every gesture, every whispered word carries weight. One misstep, and the delicate balance can shatter in an instant. You notice how the other women navigate the house. Lydia, with her calm, measured movements, seems almost untouchable. She knows who to please and when, which clients to prioritize, and when to step back. Clara, more practical, seems to anticipate trouble before it arises. You, still learning, feel the strain of every wrong glance, every misjudged smile. The night begins with a soft hum, the opening music, the quiet chatter of the first guests. Men with wallets full of coins, pride, and expectation drift in, unaware of the lessons waiting for the women who greet them. You are assigned to the parlor, observing carefully, remembering every detail, every glance, every whispered request. A gentleman arrives, his coat polished and his boots shining. He moves with confidence, his eyes sweeping over the room, assessing the women as if they were objects on display. He stops at one of the older women, the one whose elegance and calm command attention. You watch as she guides him with quiet authority, every word calculated, every gesture precise. From this interaction, you begin to learn the unspoken rules of presentation, of presence, of survival. But not all rules concern the guests. Some govern the relationships between the women themselves. Whispers in the corridors tell you which girls are allies, which are competitors, which have been here longest and command respect. You notice small things. The way one woman steps aside for another, the subtle nods exchanged in private, the avoidance of certain gazes. Never trust appearances, Lydia says when you comment on the seeming camaraderie. Friendship is a luxury here. Everything else is strategy. You begin to see it in action. A newcomer, eager and naive, smiles too broadly at Clara. Within minutes, Clara's eyes harden. She corrects the girl subtly, teaching her through implication that appearances can deceive, and that every word, every smile, every movement carries meaning. The rules also extend to the physical space of the house. Certain rooms are off limits, locked for reasons the women are not supposed to question. Curtains hide ledgers, letters, and other objects that record deals, debts, and secrets. You sense that every inch of the house is monitored, and that the madam sees far more than anyone imagines. One evening, as you move through a dimly lit corridor, you notice a new key inserted into a lock. You catch a glimpse of a ledger, its pages thick with numbers, names, and promises. The madam walks past, her presence alone enforcing silence. The women avert their eyes, pretending not to notice, because in this house, to notice is to invite trouble. Another rule emerges in client management. Guests are predictable only in their unpredictability. Some demand attention. Some offer payment and walk away. Some arrive with rumors, secrets, or debts owed elsewhere. The women must adapt instantly. One misstep, a delayed response, a wrong gesture, a misinterpreted request can escalate into insult, conflict, or worse. You witness Clara diffuse a tense situation with subtlety. A man grows angry, claiming his time has been wasted. Clara does not argue. She nods, laughs lightly, and redirects him to another room. Within moments, his anger evaporates, replaced by satisfaction. You marvel at the precision, realizing that survival requires not just patience, but a strategic mind capable of reading both words and silences. In addition to these social rules, there are practical ones. Money must be counted carefully, coins and notes meticulously recorded. The women's schedules are coordinated to ensure maximum efficiency. Meals are rationed, rest periods carefully timed, and costumes maintained to avoid visible wear. Every detail matters. You watch as the madam moves through the house, observing everything: the alignment of hair, the straightness of dresses, the composure of the women. Her presence enforces compliance without words. The house functions like a clock, each woman a gear, each client a weight, and the madam the hand that keeps everything moving. The night deepens, and the rules shift again. Fatigue sets in, judgment clouds, and mistakes are more likely. The whispers grow louder in your mind, lessons from observation, warnings from experience, echoes of past mistakes. You realize that endurance is as vital as skill. Even small missteps can have consequences: a poorly timed laugh, a glance toward the wrong guest, a hesitation in speech. All are noted, remembered, and sometimes punished silently. The women know the patterns, the rhythms, the invisible hierarchies. They survive by understanding them and by mastering the art of invisibility within the system. You notice one new girl struggling tonight. Her hands shake, her posture is tense, and her voice quivers when she speaks. The guests notice too, and some grow impatient. Clara intervenes, guiding her with quiet authority, reminding her to breathe, to observe, to listen. You see the difference between the experienced and the inexperienced, one who knows the hidden rules and one who does not. It becomes clear that survival is a combination of skill, endurance, and knowledge. The house has rules that cannot be taught outright. They must be absorbed, understood, and internalized. To survive, you must become part of the rhythm, invisible yet indispensable, present but unreadable. By the early morning, the last guests have departed. The house exhales again, the whispered lessons fade into quiet, and the women retreat to their rooms, physically and emotionally exhausted. You sit for a moment, listening to the faint creaks and soft murmurs, realizing that these walls contain more than just furniture and decor. They contain history, secrets, and the unspoken laws that dictate every action. You understand now that the brothel's power lies not in its clients, nor in its reputation, nor even in its beauty. It lies in the rules, the invisible threads that hold everything together. And to survive, you must learn them all. Every house has a client you never forget. Not because he is the kindest or the wealthiest, not because he is particularly memorable in appearance, but because his presence changes the rhythm of the night, the energy of the rooms, and the behavior of everyone around him. He arrives without fanfare. No announcement, no polite knock, just a man stepping into the warm, perfumed air of the parlor like he owns the place. His coat is dark, slightly worn, his boots scuffed from travel, but his eyes are sharp and calculating, scanning the room with a quiet authority that makes everyone present pause, even if just for a moment. You notice the subtle shift immediately. Conversations become quieter, laughter more controlled, and the women straighten with attention you can almost touch. This is not a man accustomed to being ignored. He expects attention, not loudly, not aggressively, but subtly, like a predator whose gaze alone is enough to command submission. Clara steps forward first. Her movements are precise, almost rehearsed, but her eyes flicker with awareness. She knows this client. The madam knows him too, though she does not greet him with any visible deference. This is a man who carries influence, who knows the delicate boundaries of this world and expects them to be respected. You are assigned to observe, to learn, and to absorb every nuance of the encounter. The rules you have been memorizing, the whispers you have been listening to in the corridors, all converge here. Everything matters: posture, expression, tone, timing. One mistake could unsettle the night, disrupt the rhythm, or worse, place a target on someone's back. The client chooses Clara, seating himself with ease, his eyes never leaving hers. She leans in slightly, listening intently, nodding at calculated intervals, laughing softly when he allows. You notice how she subtly mirrors his gestures, a tilt of the head, a shift of weight, a careful smile, creating a silent harmony that both disarms and captivates him. Every client has a rhythm, Clara whispers to you later when he steps away for a brief moment. You must learn to find it, match it, and anticipate it. Otherwise, you falter, and they notice. The client's presence alters more than Clara's behavior. You see the madam move differently, her gaze sharp, checking doors, watching the flow of the parlor, making sure everything is in order. Even the other women adjust, positioning themselves to remain unobtrusive, yet available. There is a choreography to this night, and this client has become the axis around which it revolves. As the evening progresses, it becomes apparent that this client is not here simply for pleasure. His questions are pointed, subtle, probing for knowledge that the women, and sometimes even the madam, must conceal. He is curious about the house, about its rules, about the connections between women and patrons. You learn something new every night, Clara murmurs to you, her tone quiet but serious. And some nights you learn that knowledge can be dangerous, especially when it comes from someone like him. You realize she means that the client's intelligence, his awareness, and his subtle probing could unravel everything if not managed carefully. You also realize that survival in this house is not just about appearances or charm. It is about knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to simply observe. Throughout the night, the client's movements and demands are precise, but not overtly aggressive. He does not shout or command. He does not intimidate with money alone. Instead, he exerts control through subtle cues: a raised eyebrow, a pause in conversation, a glance that lingers too long. You notice how each woman responds differently. Some falter, their smiles slipping just enough to betray their unease. Some maintain composure, but stiffen, their laughter slightly strained. And some, like Clara, move with fluidity, absorbing the pressure and redirecting it with grace. This is the true skill of the house, turning tension into performance, fear into composure, uncertainty into artistry. And you are learning, slowly, that this skill is what separates those who endure from those who fail. At one point, the client asks a question that makes even Clara pause. His voice is low, measured, almost conversational, but there is an edge to it that sends a ripple through the parlor. The question is about another client, someone who frequents the house but is not widely known to all the women. The madam steps in, guiding the conversation away without revealing anything, but the tension lingers. You have to learn to answer without answering, Clara whispers later. It is an art. One wrong phrase, one slip, and everything you've built tonight could crumble. You try to absorb her words, knowing that understanding is not enough. You must embody the lesson, move through it, breathe it in, make it instinctive. The night continues, and the client's presence lingers like a shadow. He moves from room to room, observing without intrusion, testing without accusation. You watch as he notes the way the women respond, the subtle cues in their body language, the shifts in their posture and expression. He notices everything, and yet, outwardly, he seems calm, almost indifferent. This is what makes him unforgettable. Not wealth, not charm, not even the threat of exposure, but the way he dominates the room without overt force, the way his attention alone commands respect and caution. Later, when he finally leaves, the house exhales. The energy that had been taut with anticipation relaxes, the whispers in the corridors fade slightly, and the women begin to regroup. Clara sinks into a chair, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, though her expression remains composed. "That one," she says quietly, "teaches you more than a week of ordinary nights. Pay attention to him, learn from him, and never underestimate the quiet power of a man like that." You nod, understanding now that every detail matters, every interaction is significant, and every client is a test. This house, these walls, these rules, they are not just about survival. They are about learning to navigate a world in which danger is subtle, consequences are hidden, and mastery is invisible. By the time dawn approaches, the parlor is quiet. The night has passed, and the lessons of the client linger like a shadow. You understand, more fully than ever, that survival requires observation, patience, composure, and a careful understanding of the invisible rules. You sit for a moment, reflecting on the night, listening to the faint echoes of footsteps and whispered conversations. The client you never forget has left a mark, not a physical one, but a lesson embedded in the rhythm of the house, in the whispers in the corridors, in the careful, controlled movements of the women. And you know that tomorrow, another night will come, another client will arrive, and the lessons will continue. You are learning, slowly, that the brothel is more than a house of entertainment. It is a school of endurance, strategy, and subtle power, and every night you are tested in ways that no one outside could imagine. It began like every other evening, the same flicker of gas lamps, the same scent of rosewater and candle smoke clinging to the heavy air, the same soft hum of music drifting through the corridors. The women moved like clockwork, their motions practiced and silent, each one adjusting ribbons, powdering faces, and exchanging faint smiles that concealed exhaustion. But beneath the surface, something felt different. The rhythm of the night, that subtle, almost musical current that kept the house running, was off. It was as though some invisible note had gone missing, and though no one could name it, everyone could feel it. Even the madam's footsteps sounded sharper than usual as she crossed the marble floor of the parlor. Her gaze lingered longer than usual on the women's dresses, the curtains, the candles. She didn't say a word, but her silence carried more weight than any reprimand. The pianist began to play, a soft, lilting melody meant to mask the creak of doors and the whispers of guests. But halfway through a familiar tune, his hands hesitated. It was subtle, just a moment's pause, yet the entire room seemed to notice. A single note struck wrong, lingering in the air like a warning. Clara's eyes met yours across the room. She gave a slight shake of her head, a signal you had learned to interpret without words. Something is wrong. Moments later, the first guest arrived. A group of well-dressed men in their late 30s, laughing too loudly, the kind of laughter that never reaches the eyes. Their coats were tailored but stained with rain, their hats dripping onto the polished floor. The madam greeted them with her perfected warmth, her tone steady despite the discomfort that began to ripple beneath the surface. The laughter continued, forced and brittle. The pianist resumed playing, but the tempo quickened, as if mirroring the tension in the room. Then came the sound that silenced everything, the sharp crack of a glass hitting the floor. The music stopped. For one frozen second, the entire parlor stood still. The laughter, the footsteps, even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, a man's voice broke the silence, calm but cutting. "Careless," he said. One of the younger women, a recent arrival, stood trembling near the shattered glass. Her hands were pale, her eyes wide with fear. You could see the way her throat tightened as she tried to form an apology, but no words came. The madam moved quickly, her presence commanding. "Accidents happen, gentlemen," she said smoothly. "Allow me to see to it." Her voice carried authority wrapped in sweetness, a reminder that this was still her house. But the man, the one with the calm voice and steady eyes, didn't smile. He studied the young woman for a moment longer before finally turning away. "Then see to it," he murmured. And just like that, the tension snapped. But it didn't fade. It lingered, humming like an invisible current through the floorboards. The pianist began again, but the melody was different now, faster, louder, uncertain. The women moved with cautious grace, glancing often toward the madam, who remained composed but alert. You could see her scanning the room, calculating every detail. Who was nervous, who was steady, who might need to be guided away before something worse unfolded. You stayed near Clara, both of you pretending to polish a set of silver trays. "That one," she whispered, nodding slightly toward the man who had spoken, "is trouble. The kind that comes dressed in fine silk and leaves ruin behind." You didn't need to ask what she meant. The stories circulated quietly in every brothel. Men who were untouchable because of their wealth or position, who could cause disaster without consequence. The music continued, but the air was brittle now. You could feel how every woman, every servant, even the pianist himself, was playing along in a performance built not for pleasure, but for protection. Hours passed, but the night never regained its rhythm. Guests came and went, but the wrong note from earlier, that broken melody, that shattered glass, hung over everything. Later, when the last of the guests had gone upstairs, you found Clara sitting quietly near the parlor window. The rain outside streaked the glass, distorting the glow of the street lamps. She didn't look at you when she spoke. "Sometimes the house goes quiet," she said softly. "The music stops. Not just the kind you hear, the kind you feel. When that happens, it means something's coming." "What kind of something?" you asked. She glanced at you then, her expression unreadable. "A change. Maybe small, maybe not. But nothing stays the same after the music stops." The following evening, you learned what she meant. The pianist didn't return. No one knew if he'd quit, fallen ill, or been dismissed. But his absence left a void that no one wanted to fill. The new musician arrived late, nervous, uncertain, and the songs he played lacked the smooth rhythm the women depended on. It threw the entire house off balance. Even the madam seemed unsettled. Her eyes were sharper, her tone clipped, and she moved through the rooms like someone listening for echoes of something that wasn't there. The women adapted as best they could. They adjusted their timing, their laughter, their smiles. But the harmony was gone, and without it, the house felt heavier, more fragile. Days blurred together, but the tension never lifted. You began to realize that the music Clara spoke of was more than just sound. It was the balance that allowed everyone to play their roles without breaking. When it disappeared, every small crack in the structure became visible. The young woman who had broken the glass left the house quietly one morning, her bed stripped, her belongings gone. No one spoke about it, but everyone noticed. Clara stopped humming when she worked. Lydia's laughter, once effortless, became faint and distant. The madam spent more time locked in her study. Even the walls seemed to sigh under the weight of silence. One night, while you were cleaning the parlor, you found a note tucked beneath the edge of the piano. It was brief, just a few words in hurried script. "When the music stops, listen to the silence. It will tell you the truth." You didn't know who wrote it, the pianist, a guest, one of the women, but the message felt like both a warning and a revelation. That night, you listened. You listened to the slow creak of the floorboards, the distant sound of rain, the faint murmur of someone crying behind a closed door. And beneath it all, you heard the rhythm of the house itself, the pulse of survival, fragile and persistent. It was not beautiful, but it was real. And for the first time, you understood that in this world, music was not about melody. It was about control, the illusion of harmony that kept everything from falling apart. The next evening, the madam gathered the women briefly in the parlor. Her tone was calm, but her words carried finality. "The house will continue," she said simply. "The song must always play, even when we can no longer hear it." No one responded. There was nothing to say. You returned to your work, polishing the brass candlesticks as the new pianist began to play. The melody was awkward, uneven, but after a few minutes it began to settle. Slowly, the rhythm returned, fragile but present. The house adjusted, as it always did. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The music had changed, and so had the women. It was a night that began like a whisper and ended like a storm. The air felt different the moment you woke, crisp, brittle, as if even the morning sun had been holding its breath. The house was quieter than usual. There was no laughter, no soft chatter, not even the hum of music drifting from the parlor. By mid-afternoon, the rumor had already spread. The inspectors were coming. That phrase alone carried enough weight to freeze every hand, still every step. You could feel it echoing through the corridors like a ghost. Inspectors meant trouble. They were not men who came to enjoy, but to judge. Their visits were infrequent, but when they came, they left the house trembling. The madam had known before anyone else, of course. She always did. A quiet word from a friend, a warning from another house across town. Information traveled quickly through the hidden network of London's brothels. She called everyone to the parlor before dusk, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "They'll be here by nightfall," she said, smoothing the folds of her deep burgundy gown. "No one speaks unless spoken to. No one corrects them, no one argues, no one shows anything that might be mistaken for defiance." The women listened silently. Some stood rigid with fear, others fidgeted with their sleeves or hair. You could see the tension tightening every jaw, every knuckle. The madam paused, glancing around the room. "Remember, they are not here for us. They are here for their reputations." She smiled thinly. "We are merely the mirrors that reflect them." Her words made sense, in that sharp, knowing way of hers, but they didn't make a fear any smaller. By the time evening came, the house had transformed. Every floor shone. Every curtain had been freshly pressed, every candle replaced. The scent of lavender water hung in the air so thickly that it almost stung your nose. Even the women's dresses were subdued, fewer jewels, darker colors, more modest cuts. You stood near the front hallway, watching the gas lamps flicker outside the frosted glass. Each passing carriage made your heart skip, until finally one slowed and stopped. The inspectors had arrived. 3 men stepped through the door. They were well dressed, with coats too fine for the hour and expressions too grave for the setting. The kind of men who wanted to look disgusted, but couldn't quite hide their curiosity. "Good evening, gentlemen," the madam said smoothly, curtsying just enough to acknowledge their authority without surrendering to it. The first man, tall and narrow-faced, gave a curt nod. "We've had complaints," he said. "Noise, disturbances, questionable conduct. The usual, I'm afraid." The madam smiled faintly. I assure you, sir, this house conducts itself with the utmost discretion. The second inspector snorted quietly. That's what they all say. The inspection began. They walked slowly through the corridors, their gloved hands brushing against polished banisters, their eyes scanning every detail as though the truth might be hidden in the wallpaper. The madam followed closely, her tone polite but careful. You and Clara stayed near the parlor, pretending to tidy the furniture. Every creak of the floorboards made you freeze. In the kitchen, one of the younger women, nervous, new, dropped a tray. The sound was deafening in the silence that followed. The clatter of metal on stone echoed like a warning bell. The inspectors turned. The madam's smile didn't falter. "A small accident," she said quickly. "The poor thing's hands shake when she's nervous. She's only been with us a week." One of the men raised an eyebrow. "A week, you say?" His tone was casual, but there was something predatory in it, the curiosity of a man who enjoyed power more than principle. "She's 20, the madam replied evenly, before the question could come, "and she works only in the kitchen. You may check the records if you wish." The man hesitated, then looked away. In truth, there were no records. At least, not the kind that could stand up to official scrutiny. The madam's records were handwritten lists kept in her private drawer. Birth dates shifted, names adjusted, details blurred. It was not deceit, it was survival. In a world that punished women for existing, truth was a luxury few could afford. The inspectors moved on, their footsteps echoing through the hall. They peeked into rooms, opened doors without knocking, made notes in their small leather books. The women stood still as statues, their smiles brittle and practiced. When the inspectors reached the parlor, you could feel the air tighten. They examined the furniture, the piano, the paintings on the wall. One of them ran a gloved finger along the edge of a gilded mirror and smirked at the dust that came away. "Not as clean as it looks," he said. The madam met his gaze, her tone light. "London dust, sir. It finds its way even into the purest homes." That made him laugh, a dry, humorless sound, but he said no more. Hours passed in this quiet torment. The inspectors spoke little, though their glances said enough. Their eyes lingered on the women just a second too long, their expressions hovering between disdain and temptation. By midnight, the air was thick with unspoken words. The women had retreated to their rooms, waiting for the ordeal to end. You and Clara sat together in the corridor, listening to the low murmur of voices coming from the study where the madam entertained the inspectors with brandy and polite conversation. "Do you think they'll shut us down?" you whispered. Clara shook her head slowly. "No, they never do, not unless someone important complains." "Then why come?" She gave a faint, weary smile. "To remind us who's allowed to look down." Sometime after 1 in the morning, the study door opened. The inspectors stepped out, their faces flushed with drink and self-satisfaction. "We'll overlook the complaints for now," the first one said, adjusting his gloves. "But we'll be keeping an eye on this place. Standards must be maintained." "Of course," the madam replied smoothly. "Gentlemen, it's been an honor." They left without another word, the door closing behind them with a heavy finality. The moment the sound faded, the madam's shoulders dropped. The mask fell away, and for a brief second, she looked older, not in years, but in weariness. The house exhaled with her. When dawn broke, the silence felt different, softer, lighter. The worst had passed. You found the madam in the parlor, seated near the cold fireplace, a cup of untouched tea beside her. She didn't look up when you entered. "They'll come again," she said quietly. "They always do, but we'll be ready." You nodded, unsure what to say. After a pause, she added, "Do you know what the real danger is? Not the inspectors. It's the quiet after they leave. That's when the women start thinking too much. When the house remembers how fragile it is." You understood. The house lived by illusion, order, luxury, laughter. Without it, the truth was unbearable. You looked toward the piano. It sat silent, its keys gathering dust. "The music stopped again," you said softly. The madam's eyes flicked toward it. "Then play something," she murmured. "Even if it's only pretend, it's better than silence." And so you did. Your fingers trembled on the keys at first, the notes uneven and hesitant. But as the melody grew, the house seemed to breathe again. One by one, the women drifted from their rooms, drawn by the familiar sound. Clara smiled faintly as she passed, whispering, "Back to work then." The madam straightened her shoulders, fixing her hair in the reflection of the mirror. By the time the sun rose fully, the house had returned to its rhythm, the same careful dance of smiles and secrets. But beneath the polished surface, you could still feel it, the echo of footsteps, the weight of eyes, the quiet reminder that in this world, peace was never permanent. And yet, somehow, that made the music all the more beautiful. It started with an empty bed. No screams in the night, no sound of footsteps slipping through the hall. Just a cold sheet, a pillow left with the faint impression of a head that wouldn't return. By morning, everyone in the house knew. Maggie was gone. At first, no one wanted to say it aloud. The women went about their chores quietly, glancing at her room whenever they passed. The door stood ajar, as though waiting for her to step back through it with her usual tired smile, claiming she'd only gone for a walk or to visit a friend, but she didn't. Maggie had been one of the steady ones, quiet, soft-spoken, with that fragile sort of kindness that made you forget where you were for a moment. She'd come to the house 2 winters ago, carrying a small leather bag and a story she never fully told. There were rumors, of course. There were always rumors. But Maggie never fed them. She worked, she smiled, she kept to herself. And now, she was simply gone. The madam didn't like scenes. She gathered everyone in the parlor before breakfast, her voice calm but sharp, her tone leaving no room for hysteria. "She's probably left on her own," she said. "Girls do that sometimes. The city can pull at you when you've had enough of the same faces and walls. It's no one's fault, and it's no business of ours to gossip about it." But even as she spoke, her eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of unease. The truth was, girls didn't just leave, not without their wages, not without their things. Maggie's shoes were still under her bed, her comb still on the dresser, her rosary, she never went anywhere without it, lay neatly coiled beside her mirror. She hadn't left. She'd disappeared. That night, the house felt heavier. Even the laughter downstairs, practiced, brittle, strained, couldn't fill the quiet that lingered in the corners. You and Clara found yourselves standing outside Maggie's room again, the two of you staring at the empty bed as though it might suddenly explain itself. "She wouldn't just go," Clara murmured, "not without saying goodbye." "Maybe she met someone," you said, though your voice lacked conviction. Clara shook her head. "If she had, she would have told me. We shared everything." You hesitated. "Do you think someone took her?" Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The next day, two men came asking questions. Not inspectors this time, constables. Their uniforms were plain, their expressions tired. They spoke with the madam in the front room, though you could hear fragments of the conversation through the half-open door. When was the last time she was seen? 3 nights ago. Any quarrels? Debts? She was quiet, kept to herself. Did she ever mention wanting to leave? She mentioned dreaming of leaving. But dreams aren't crimes, are they? There was a pause. A chair creaked. One of the constables sighed. "We'll make inquiries," he said. "But these things, well, you know how it goes." Yes, everyone knew how it went. When a woman from a place like this went missing, the city rarely looked for long. For a few days, life tried to return to normal. The house reopened, the guests returned, the laughter resumed. But the rhythm was off. It was as if a string had been cut from a violin. You could still play, but the tune wasn't right. You'd catch glimpses of Maggie everywhere, her reflection in a mirror, the sound of her laugh in another's voice, the faint echo of her footsteps on the stairs. It was as though her absence had become a presence of its own. The madam said little. But sometimes, late at night, you could hear her pacing in her office, her steps restless, sharp, uneven. One evening, she called Clara in. The door closed softly behind her. You lingered outside, not to eavesdrop, but because something in the air told you it mattered. Through the muffled wall, you caught only fragments. Danger. Promised him nothing. No one is to know. Then silence. When Clara emerged, her face was pale. She didn't speak for the rest of the night. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, no name, just a small folded page with one line written in hurried ink. "She's gone south. Don't look." The madam read it once, folded it carefully, and slipped it into her desk drawer. She didn't show it to anyone else, but word spread anyway, as it always did. The women whispered about it between shifts, their voices low and nervous. Gone south could mean many things. Some said it meant she'd joined another house. Others said it meant she'd been taken, sold maybe, to one of the darker districts near the docks, where girls vanished as easily as candlelight in fog. But deep down, you knew none of the stories were true, because the letter didn't sound like Maggie. It didn't sound like anyone you knew. It sounded like a warning. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring out into the London mist. "She was scared, you know," she said quietly. "Maggie. She never said of what, but I could tell. Every time the door opened, she'd flinch. Every time someone new came in, she'd find a reason to leave the room." "Did she tell you why?" Clara shook her head. Just that she'd once trusted the wrong man, and that she'd never do it again. She looked at you then, eyes glistening in the dim light. "Do you think she broke that promise?" You didn't answer, because in a place like this, promises were like perfume, sweet, fleeting, gone by morning. The weeks turned into months. The seasons shifted. New girls arrived, old ones left. The rooms changed faces, but never their ghosts. And yet, sometimes, late at night, when the wind moved through the cracks in the walls, you could swear you heard footsteps on the stairs, light, familiar, lingering just long enough to make your heart race. Once, you even saw a figure in the hallway, pale dress, loose hair, the faintest smile before she vanished into the dark. You wanted to believe it was imagination, but something about it stayed with you. The madam never spoke of Maggie again. Neither did Clara. Neither did you. But the silence around her name became part of the house's fabric, woven between its laughter and its lies. One foggy morning, nearly a year later, a small box arrived at the door. Inside, a silver locket, tarnished at the edges, and a slip of paper with only 2 words, "For Clara." No one knew who sent it. The madam handed it over without comment. Clara opened it with trembling hands. Inside the locket was a lock of hair, auburn, just like Maggie's, and a tiny pressed violet, faded but still fragrant. Clara didn't cry. She just closed it gently, holding it in her palm as though afraid it might vanish too. "Maybe she's alive," you whispered. Clara nodded, though her eyes said otherwise. "Maybe," she said softly, "but she's gone all the same." After that, the house grew quieter in small ways. The jokes were softer, the smiles slower. Even the madam seemed more careful with her words, as though she, too, had realized how easily a person could disappear without sound. The piano still played, the guests still came. The city outside still moved with its usual rhythm, trams clattering, vendors shouting, church bells tolling. But inside, something had shifted forever. Because once someone vanished like that, you stopped trusting the walls to hold you. And you began to understand. The real danger in a Victorian brothel wasn't the work, or the men, or even the law. It was being forgotten. She never told anyone her real name. To the city, she was simply Madam. To the authorities, a respectable businesswoman who paid her dues on time. To the girls, both protector and prison keeper. Her face was known across half of London, but no one knew where she'd come from, only that she arrived one winter and, by spring, had turned a quiet townhouse into one of the most exclusive establishments in the city. But beneath the polished calm, there was something old about her. Not in age, she was no older than 40, but in the eyes, the posture, the stillness that came only from living through too many storms. You never asked. None of the girls did. In a house like this, curiosity was a dangerous luxury. But sometimes, when she sat alone by the fire after closing, her gaze unfocused, the mask slipped, just for a moment, and you could almost glimpse the life that came before. That night began like so many others, rain tapping the window panes, the faint hum of laughter downstairs, the low chords of the piano echoing through the halls. You'd been sent to fetch the madam's ledger, the thick leather book she guarded like a living thing. It held more than names and numbers. It held power. Inside were debts, favors, secrets, the invisible threads that bound her world together. When you entered her office, she was there, sitting beside the fire with a small glass of brandy in her hand. The room smelled of tobacco and violets. Papers were spread across the desk, but she wasn't reading them. She was staring into the flames. "You can set it there," she said softly, not looking up. You did, but something about her voice, quieter than usual, almost uncertain, made you hesitate. "Madam," you asked gently, "are you well?" For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, without turning, she said, "Do you believe people can truly start over?" You blinked. "I suppose so." She smiled faintly, still watching the fire. "I used to believe that too." Later that night, she called you back. The other girls were asleep, the guests gone, the corridors dim. She was still by the fire, though now the brandy glass sat empty beside her. "Sit," she said. You obeyed. She studied you for a moment, not unkindly, but with the sort of focus that made you feel transparent. "You're the curious type," she said finally. "I can tell. That's good. Dangerous, but good." She leaned back in her chair, eyes distant. "I wasn't born for this life, you know. None of us are. But I wasn't dragged into it either. I walked here, step by step." You waited, afraid to interrupt. "My father was a banker," she continued. "Respectable, cold. My mother was what you'd call decorative. She smiled when she was told to. She spoke when spoken to. When I was 16, I was promised to a man twice my age. A partnership, they called it. He had influence. My father wanted his favor." Her lips tightened. "I didn't. So I ran." You leaned forward slightly, unsure if she wanted you to respond. "I thought I'd find freedom," she said. "But London doesn't give freedom to girls like me. It gives you choices that all look the same once you step into the dark." She paused, swirling the last trace of liquid in her glass. "I found work at a theater, then with a dressmaker, then here." The way she said "here" carried an entire history. Years of survival, of negotiation, of becoming someone else. "Did someone teach you?" you asked quietly. Her eyes flicked toward you, sharp again. "Teach me?" "How to run a house like this." For the first time that night, she smiled, a real smile, faint but warm. "No one teaches you. You learn by watching, by listening, by deciding which kind of monster you can afford to be." She sighed. "There was a woman once, French, elegant, ruthless. She taught me what power looked like in a world that pretended women had none. She said, if they will not let you be respectable, be untouchable instead." She set her glass down. "So, I became untouchable." Her gaze returned to the fire, and for a long moment, she seemed lost somewhere far away. The next morning, she was back to her usual self, crisp, composed, eyes sharp as glass. If anyone noticed she hadn't slept, they didn't mention it. But you began to see her differently after that. The way she kept the house running wasn't just control, it was armor. Every ledger, every rule, every carefully measured smile, it was all part of the fortress she'd built around the woman she used to be. One evening, Clara caught you watching her from across the parlor. "She scares you, doesn't she?" Clara said with a small grin. "A little," you admitted. "She scares everyone," Clara said. "That's how she keeps us safe." You frowned. "Safe? From who?" Clara gave a small, sad smile. "From everyone else." A few nights later, a letter arrived, sealed with black wax, the kind reserved for serious matters. The madam read it alone, her expression unreadable. Afterward, she burned it in the fire without a word. But something changed in her after that. She grew quieter, more distant. Sometimes you'd find her standing by the window, watching the fog roll through the street, her hand resting on the curtain as though tempted to step outside. The girls whispered. Some said she was ill, others said she was in trouble, but no one dared ask her directly. Then one evening she summoned you again. "Close the door," she said. When you did, she handed you a small envelope. "If anything ever happens to me," she said softly, "you'll take this to a man named Harrington on Fleet Street. He'll know what to do." You hesitated. "Happens to you?" She smiled faintly. "It's just a precaution. I've learned that in this world, women like us must always think ahead." That night, she didn't go upstairs. She stayed in her office until dawn, sorting papers, writing in her ledger, burning old correspondence. By morning, the fire had died, and her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Life went on, but there was a tension now, a quiet expectation that something, unseen but inevitable, was approaching. Then, one afternoon, a stranger came calling. Well-dressed, polite, too polite. He asked for the madam by name, her real name. You froze when you heard it. She appeared moments later, perfectly composed, as if she'd expected him. They spoke privately in her study for nearly an hour. When the man left, his expression was grim, hers unreadable. That evening, the madam announced that the house would close for a few nights, for cleaning and rest. The women exchanged puzzled looks, but no one questioned her. She spent those days locked in her room. When she finally emerged, she looked different, lighter somehow, as though she'd finally put something down. One night, near the end of the week, you found her outside the house for the first time, standing under a lamppost with her cloak pulled tight. The fog swirled around her like smoke. "You shouldn't be out here," you said softly. She smiled. "Neither should you." "I couldn't sleep," you admitted. "Neither could I." She looked toward the darkened street, her expression far away. "Do you know why I keep this place so tightly run?" You shook your head. "Because chaos is how the world forgets you. But order, even in a house like this, gives you shape. It says, 'I exist. I have rules. I will not vanish quietly.'" Her voice softened. "That's all I ever wanted." You didn't know what to say, so you just stood there beside her in silence, the two of you watching the fog drift past. A week later, she disappeared. No note, no warning. The house simply woke one morning to find her office empty, her ledgers gone, her brandy glass still on the desk. In her place was a sealed envelope addressed to you. Inside, only a single sentence. "When the time comes, keep the house running, but don't become me." Clara found you holding the letter hours later. She didn't ask what it said. She just nodded, as though she already knew. The women waited for her to return. They kept the rooms clean, the lights low, the rules the same, but she never came back. And yet, somehow, her presence lingered, in the scent of violets, in the order she'd built, in the way the women stood a little straighter when they spoke her name. Because in a city that forgot women so easily, she had done something extraordinary. She had made herself unforgettable. And in that way, even in her absence, the madam never truly left. The house was never the same after she vanished. At first, everyone told themselves she'd return, that the madam was merely taking care of business elsewhere. Maybe she'd gone to Brighton for a rest, or across the river to settle a debt, or perhaps she was visiting the mysterious Mr. Harrington she'd once mentioned. But as the weeks turned into months, the story began to crumble. Without her, the rhythm of the house changed. The piano sounded lonelier, the laughter forced. The air that had once hummed with hidden power now felt heavy, uncertain. The madam's absence wasn't just the loss of a person, it was the loss of gravity itself. Everything she had held together began, slowly, to drift apart. Clara was the first to notice. "The clients are different," she murmured one night. "Cheaper, meaner." You'd seen it too. Without the madam's eye at the door, the quality of men changed. They spoke louder, drank more, demanded more. They didn't fear the quiet authority that had once ruled the room. And the women, tired, cautious, bruised by the uncertainty, began to whisper of leaving. Some found work elsewhere. Others vanished between nights, taking what little they owned. By midwinter, the house felt hollow. The red curtains still hung, the lamps still burned, but the soul of the place, that fragile illusion of control, had begun to fade. One evening, you went through the madam's old office. Everything was still in its place, her desk, her mirror, the faint scent of violets that refused to die. A thin layer of dust had begun to gather on the ledger shelf, and in the fireplace, a few scraps of half-burned paper still lingered, curling like dried petals. Among them, you found a fragment of a letter, just a few words legible along the edge. "They will come for what I owe." You stared at it, a chill running through you. Had she left to escape someone, or to protect the rest of you? You'd never know. But the silence that followed her departure, the kind that filled every hallway and echoed in every quiet room, began to feel like a warning. A month later, the first real trouble came. A man in a dark coat arrived one night, his boots muddy, his accent clipped. He wasn't a customer. He asked questions, too many of them, about the madam, about money, about who was running things now. Clara sent him away with a smile, but her hands were shaking when she closed the door. "That night," she whispered, "she left us to clean her mess." You wanted to argue, but couldn't, because maybe it was true. Maybe the madam had built her fortress too well, and now that she was gone, it was turning into a tomb. Still, you tried to keep things together. You opened the books each morning, balanced what little came in, comforted the girls when they wept or fought. You became what she'd asked you to be, the caretaker of her ghost. But every time you signed a receipt or took a payment, you heard her voice in your mind. "Don't become me." And yet, every day, you felt yourself doing just that. Winter deepened. The nights grew colder. Sometimes, when you walked through the parlor, you could see your own breath clouding in the lamplight. Customers thinned. The girls were restless. Then, one night, as the snow began to fall over London, a knock came at the door. When you opened it, there stood a woman, tall, thin, wrapped in a traveling cloak. Her face was half hidden by the hood, but her voice, "May I come in?" You froze. It was her, the madam. She looked older, paler. The calm polish she'd once carried like a weapon was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something else. Fear, perhaps, or relief. "Close the door," she said softly. You obeyed, heart pounding. For a long moment, you just stared at her. "We thought you were dead," she said, with a faint, brittle smile. "Not yet." You hesitated. Where did you go? She sighed. Someplace quiet. I thought I could make a clean break. But debts don't like to be forgotten. Her gaze swept over the parlor, the faded curtains, the tired faces peeking from the hall, and her expression softened. You've kept it standing. You swallowed. Barely. She sank into her old chair, rubbing her temples. They're coming tonight. Who? The ones who think they own me. You stepped closer. Then we should... No. She looked up sharply. You'll do nothing. You'll say nothing. When they come, you'll tell them the house belongs to you now. They'll believe it. You shook your head. I can't. You can, she said, voice steady again, because if you don't, they'll take everything, including the girls. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for your arm. Promise me. You nodded. And for the first time since she'd returned, she smiled. Small, weary, but real. Good. Then I can rest. They came near midnight. 3 men, dressed too well for their intentions. The kind of men who spoke softly and smiled while taking everything. You met them in the parlor. The madams stayed out of sight upstairs. They asked questions. You gave careful answers. You told them the truth, just not the whole of it. By dawn, they were gone, and so was she. You found her in her room, sitting by the window, the faintest smile on her lips. A single candle burned beside her, nearly melted to nothing. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than you'd ever seen her. On the table beside her lay a small key and a folded letter addressed to you. Your hands shook as you opened it. I've done all I can. The rest belongs to you now. Keep the house, but make it a kinder one. You wept quietly as the sun began to rise over the rooftops. Outside, the city stirred, carts creaking, boots splashing through melting snow, another day beginning. And inside, you knew what you had to do. You buried her name in silence, as she would have wanted. The girls wore black ribbons for a week. Clara lit candles each night by the fireplace. Then, one morning, you reopened the doors. Not for the men who came seeking the old life, but for women who needed shelter. The house changed slowly. The red lamps came down. The piano was tuned again. The air began to soften. You kept the rules, but not her fear. You carried her memory, but not her chains. And when newcomers asked who had once run the place, you simply said, a woman who refused to vanish. Years later, the house still stood. The world outside had changed. Gas lights to electricity, carriages to motor cars, but the women within still found refuge in its quiet rooms. And sometimes, late at night, when the fire burned low, you'd swear you could smell violets in the air. As if she were still there, watching, making sure you never became her, but that you never forgot her either.